hairs on my body started standing on end.
Silent. Nothing there.
I fought to get back into my body.
You are going to be of vital importance of helping us convince the masses.
Type 471.
Type 471.
Bridge to the other world.
Bridge to the other world.
Welcome to Type 471. I'm Sam Kitchen. So this is a new show, and my listeners don't know that much about me yet. I have mentioned Sasquatch, but my listeners don't know just how near and dear Sasquatch is to me. I had my own encounter a number of years ago. It was pretty intense. My guest today is Kip, and he has had some amazing Sasquatch experiences. I'm looking forward to talking to him because this is a big deal. Kip, welcome to Type 471.
Hi, Sam. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be talking to you tonight. So let's start at the beginning. You've had more than one Sasquatch encounter, and I want to hear about all of it from the very beginning. Can we do that?
Okay. Yeah.
Cool.
I was doing in 2016, I was doing a long-distance pedal from Tulsa, Oklahoma to York, Nebraska. I'm a sous chef, so my next posting was in Nebraska. And my bucket list was to do a long-distance pedal, so I was given 20 days, did it in 8, but I had stopped off in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. I looked to the right when I was pedaling. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning. Cars were getting too close, and I needed to get off the road. I was getting tired. And I looked over to the right, down lower, and there was a machine shop or mechanic shop. And across from that was an old wooden boxcar without the wheels they used for storage. And behind that was some sand pits or ponds they had used to build a bridge. So I went behind that boxcar and set my tent up, and I was sitting there having a smoke, and I had my earbuds in, and I got hit by this god-awful stench. It was like rotten meat and onions and sulfur and garbage. Best I can explain it. You know, in my brain, registered skunk. Like I told you the first time, I don't know if you've ever been up next to an elephant, but when they walk, they make the ground tremble.
Right.
And the next thing I know, I'm feeling these footsteps. Now, I'm an outdoorsman. I know what a quadruped versus a bipedal looks, feels, sounds like, tracks, you know. And these footsteps are going by the tent, and it tripped over the corner of my tent and flipped my bike on top of me. And I wasn't going to duck my head out there, you know. Like I told you, all I had was a hatchet and a pocket knife. The next morning I got up, and, you know, the weeds are about hip high, and you could see the footsteps going towards the pond. So I went and looked at them, and I realized that they were like 5.5, 6 feet stride. And that's, you know, that's when I started scratching my head, because as far as I was concerned, Bigfoot was a bunch of hooey. You know, it was just bullshit.
I know the feeling. That's what I thought before I had my encounter. It's not something that I had entertained as real, and I think you were in the same position.
Yeah. So I started doing some research, you know, got on Google once I got home, and I found that there's been sightings and encounters from eastern Oklahoma all the way down to the coast. I actually had come across a story about a Cree or Creek Indian tribe that French trappers had come through, and they had told them that hairy men were stealing their women and children.
Oh.
And when the trappers had come back through, the entire tribe, or they had killed one. They had killed one. And I've tried to find that story since then, and I can't find it, but I'm sure somebody out there might know. And when the French trappers came back through, the entire tribe was massacred, bodies torn in half, thrown in the tops of trees. You know, they didn't have the technology. They have to have catapults to toss a body up that high.
What bodies were tossed up in trees?
The native tribe, the Indians.
Gotcha. Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that.
The entire tribe, arms and legs pulled off, bodies torn in half, parts of bodies thrown in trees, on the tops of trees.
Okay.
You know, and that's documented somewhere. I read it. So, of course, nobody believed me. And then I moved out here to Oregon, and I had gone camping with this gal. I was looking for a place outside Reedsport on the Umpqua River that I had camped at in the 80s, but I couldn't find it. So I flagged down this guy that was fishing, and I asked him if he knew a place to go camp. And he said, yeah, just hit up that road. It's by Loon Lake. I went up there, and I'm not going to say exactly where. And we found a spot on a mountain road, and we just camped by the side of the road. And as I'm setting up the camp, I realized that there was no life, no rabbits, no squirrels, no bird song. There wasn't even bugs. And I made mention of it to the girl, and we went about our day and everything. And that night, she was laying beside me, and we were tent camping that night, so we were on the ground. And when I had collected sticks and kindling and stuff for fire, I had picked up all the kindling and everything that was around there. So I know how clean it was. And I was still awake because she was snoring. I could hear, and the tent was facing the mountain. It was probably 100 feet to the top of the mountain, and I could hear from the right, let's say facing 12 o'clock, from 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock coming down the mountain, breaking sticks, making noise. But what concerned me was what was creeping up on me behind the tent. It was snapping little twigs that was underneath the grass. At the point that this was about 2 feet away from my head, and there was the rain fly. There was a spot where I could have just sat up and looked through it, but for some reason I couldn't sit up and look. I wasn't afraid, but I couldn't move.
You were unable to physically move your body.
Yeah, and I'm thinking to myself, why don't you look? Why don't you look? But I was so engrossed in with these snapping of these little twigs underneath the grass. So I knew it was very close to me. Right then, the girl sits up. Oh, there was noise from you're messing with utensils on the camp table.
Okay.
And remember, there were no animals. One could say it was a squirrel or something, but there were no animals. There was no movement, no life there.
Just kind of eerily dead and quiet.
Yes, and that's now in hindsight, that's a very documented thing.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Reported. But anyway, so right then the girl sits up and goes, "What was that?" And there was no running sound. There was no bug out, nothing. It just went dead silent. So we came out of the tent, nothing there. Nothing there. So we came back into the tent. We're sitting there probably 20 minutes later, and suddenly you hear this 20-foot owl going for probably 8-10 seconds, and then it lifted up in pitch to a really high pitch. So it probably lasted 10-12 seconds.
Oh wow!
I mean, you could feel it vibrating your rib cage. It was no barn owl. I know what a barn owl sounds like. No, I actually had a witness in, but I parted ways from that gal. She turned out to be a little too weird. But I really wish I'd have at least kept her number so I could have her as a witness.
A lot of times, you think in hindsight, oh, I should have done this or I should have done that, and then I would know more about what happened or be able to compare notes or something.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a lot of that.
I was just glad to be rid of her.
Yeah.
To be honest.
I hear you.
And my next encounter was I lived outside Shady Cove, Oregon, on a farm. I was their caretaker for their animals in exchange for my rent while I filed for disability. And June, late morning, and I was sitting outside under my canopy outside my motorhome, and I was chatting with my cousin in Nebraska, and I was just staring off into space. And like I told you, when the superhero Flash, when he runs, there's that tracer behind him, that blur.
Yes.
And that's what caught my attention from about 150 yards away. And I look up and I see this tracer going, and he slows down and stops and walks behind a tree. And I was like, whoa, and I'm telling my cousin about this. And while I'm telling him, 3 to 5 minutes later, you could see him walking back just inside the tree line, just as casual as could be, doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. And it felt like he intended for me to see him. Like that's what it was meant for. I don't know how to explain it any more than that.
Though, does this include the whole time, like even while he was running so fast that you saw this tracer behind him?
No, that was the whole tracer thing. Probably lasted a second and a half.
Uh-huh.
It was that fast.
Mm.
You know, stories that I've read and stuff. You know, I've heard how fast they are, but nothing prepared me that they were that fast.
How much ground do you think he covered in that period of time?
In a second, let's just say, a second. Now, let's be generous and say a second and a half. I'd say 200 feet.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah. I've never asked myself that question.
Yeah.
That's pretty fast. But the way y'all casually just walk inside the tree line, if I was to guess, I'd say 3 or 4 feet inside the tree line. And it just felt in my gut that whole thing was meant for me to see him.
I was going to ask you, what did this individual look like?
Large, dark brownish black, coney head. That's about all I can tell you.
Okay.
I mean, it happened so fast. And he walked behind that tree. And then when he reappeared, he was inside the tree line.
Do you have any impression of his face at all?
No.
Okay.
No, I do not. I wish I had. Wouldn't that be cool? It's a cool story to tell.
Yeah.
You know, it feels like, and we discussed this, it feels like since that first encounter, that once they know that you know about them, they go out of their way to make themselves known.
Yeah.
So on to the fourth encounter. COVID had just hit last spring, and everybody was freaking out. So I said, screw this. I went and bought a generator and some water barrels, and I loaded up my motorhome and went up way behind that lake I told you about.
Okay.
And, you know, it's probably 15, 20 miles behind that lake. And I was the only one on the mountain. I stayed there for 5.5 months. And I like to paint rocks and leave rocks for people to find on trails and stuff. So I found this rock that was shaped like a Sasquatch head, came to a point. I sent you a picture of it.
Yeah.
And I painted it to look like a Sasquatch. It even had a little protrusion for a nose. And I left that sit on that TV tray that I painted on for a couple weeks. And that's when things started happening after that. And, you know, in the morning, and when I started figuring out something was going on, one of the times I had come back for groceries and stuff, I looked up on my phone all the native names for Sasquatch. So I had a list of it in my phone that I locked in. So every morning I would come out and I would say good morning, you know, to the forest people. When I came there, I introduced, because I have my little kitty, and he's my camping buddy, hiking buddy. And I introduced him, and I said, please be kind to my kitty, and thank you for allowing us in your home. And there were wood knocks from 50 feet away. You know, I'd be inside my motorhome, but, you know, I got good hearing. I know how far away I was hearing it from. Let's see. They would leave gifts for me. When I would hike a trail, I always followed my footsteps. And when I would come back, and there would be, like one time there was a blue jay feather crossed an X with a bluish raven feather over my footprints.
Wow. That's pretty cool.
They left a green rock on my step in the morning, and then another time there's this red rock. Now, I had 5.5 months to live on that mountain. I explored that thing in the bush. I knew that entire mountain. I was the only one on it.
That's plenty of time. That's lots of alone time you had with the Sasquatch up there.
Yeah. And I looked for green rocks. I could find no green rocks. And they left this red rock. It's a really smooth rock. It's got this iridescent white that goes through it. And it looks like maybe it was used for arrowheads at one time, or maybe it was supposed to be an axe head or something. I don't know. But that was left on my step. Another time there was a perfectly white bleached bone left on my step.
Just to back up for a second, they left for you this rock that looked like it had been worked before.
Yes. I don't know if I don't think they use tools, but it doesn't mean that they didn't find it from past natives. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely.
It might have just been a rock, for all I know.
Right. And if it had been worked, it could be a rock that they found recently that had been worked. But it's also occurring to me that, you know, what if they passed down heirlooms to one another? Like maybe this was maybe they had found this a long time ago, and they knew that it was the work of humans, and they passed it down through generations. I mean, things like this. I mean, they sound incredible, but they're becoming more and more plausible. And you also mentioned this this other rock that was not native to the specific area you were in, and I find that very interesting because it sounds to me like it's
neither rocks.
Right, and it sounds to me like a form of communication, like they're telling you where they go, you know, like they're telling you this is where we've been, and you know, this is where you can find us. It's like a little clue, you know, it's like an invitation almost.
Yeah, and there was another time I had hiked up to the top of the mountain. Hot Rod, my kitty, was with me, and I packed us a lunch. You know, and there's these boulders that we'd sit on, and we'd hang out while I'd have snack while he did his thing. I had gone up there and I had gotten the lunch stuff, and he decided he wanted to go back home. So before I could get everything packed up, he was gone. So I'm thinking, oh man. So I hauled ass down the fire road, and nope, wasn't there. And so then I run back up to the top of the mountain. It's about a half-hour hike back to the top. And I'm getting frantic because I can't find my cat. So when I got back there, I turned around at the top of the mountain. I see these vultures circling. And then I was pissed. So I ran in there and I couldn't find them. I said, all right. And then I went back down to my motorhome. I didn't have a firearm, but I'm a sous chef. I have some very sharp knives that are in sheaths, and I belted up both on one side, and I was angry. I said to the force, I said, you send that son of a bitch out to me. I know I'm going to lose, but he's going to know who I am. Bring him out. And then I kind of started feeling guilty, and I said, if it wasn't you, leave me a feather up on the road, because there was one road going to the top of the mountain, and there was a side road going down the side of the mountain, and that's the one I was on. Well, I had turned around, and 30 feet back up the trail on my footprints was a bright orange feather sitting right on my footprint. And I get back to the motorhome, and there's Hot Rod waiting for me.
Your cat was safe and sound.
Yeah.
I'm relieved to hear that, because every time you talk about your cat, it makes me think of my dog. Like, the relationship you have with your cat is the same as I have with my dog, and that would just be terrifying to me.
He's more like a dog than he is a cat.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And cruise in the car. He's a pretty cool little dude.
Before we continue, you've mentioned some of the pictures you sent me. The picture of the Sasquatch head that you painted on a rock, and you sent me some other pictures as well. And I'm sure we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But I've been meaning to ask you. I like to share the pictures associated with my guests on my Instagram feed. So would you?
Fine.
Okay, great. So I just want to take a moment to remind our listeners that they can look for Type 471 podcast on Instagram, and they can see the pictures that we're talking about. So Kip, go ahead with your story. There's
a few. There are, in that area where I lived, there were 3 different tree twists. About 7 feet up off the ground, 3 different ones.
Yeah.
And from what I understand, it's young ones showing their, acting out or showing their territory or whatever. I don't know. And then the scary thing that happened. So I was watering my plants, and I was sitting there having a cigarette, probably 7 o'clock in the morning. And it was done, and I had just been sitting there enjoying the morning, quiet and alone. The wind's blowing at my back, and the madrone trees were just losing their leaves, so there was a lot of leaves on the ground. And again, I know the sound of bipedal footsteps, and I hear a group coming up this canyon wall that comes up to the fire road. And I'm guessing, when they're going through leaves, it's hard to tell, but I'm guessing 3 or 4, and it's loud. So I stood up and I looked down, because I'm up above the fire road. Then it goes down the side of this canyon. I was like, what the hell is that? So I walked around in like a letter C, about 10 feet over to get a closer look. Suddenly behind me, apparently they had to cut it. Maybe there was a fire at one time and they cut a fire line. So there was a lot of downed heavy limbs and small limbs. I mean, and then it went into the tree line.
Sure.
And behind me, something started stomping again, bipedal, stomping through the heavy limbs. And I turned around and said, I mean, there's only two things I'm scared of. And that's Dennis and my dad. But this, all I could do, next thing I know, I sat down and stared at the ground. Terror, sheer terror. And, you know, my mind is thinking, what the F? What's going on here? What are you doing? But I couldn't move. I was frightened more than I've ever been frightened in my life.
So there were two occasions. Sorry to interrupt. There were two occasions where you were frozen associated with the Sasquatch. One of those occasions you were afraid, the other you were not.
The other one I wasn't exactly frozen, but I couldn't seem to make myself sit up and look.
Mm-hmm. Do you think these are two different things happening?
No. I think it was, I don't really know about the first time, you know. I don't know why I didn't sit up on my elbows and just look out the crack of the rain fly. But for some reason I couldn't or didn't. But I believe they use infrasound. And I know what I experienced that morning. And I was just out of my wits, sheer terror. And I don't remember hearing them move away or come up to the top. I don't remember any of that. All I could do was just look at the ground and shake. And then it lifted. Then I was pissed off at it because they did that to me. And I told them so. It didn't happen again, but...
What do you mean by...
It's not cool.
Yeah, no kidding. What do you mean by it lifted?
Suddenly I wasn't afraid anymore.
Oh.
Suddenly that terror was gone.
Interesting.
It just disappeared. I mean, I hold a black belt in karate. I've been a bouncer, and I used to provide personal security for a lot of famous bands. I don't get afraid. Pretty cool under pressure, but that situation, I don't know what happened to me, but I didn't shit my pants.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let me see. Now, that's something that is also often reported, that inability to move or being frozen with fear. I think it's interesting that your fear just kind of immediately subsided, like maybe it is, in fact, associated with infrasound or some other defense mechanism that they have to cause you to freeze in fear until they're safe or what have you.
I'll give you a visual to imagine it. Imagine a volume line going up, right?
Okay.
And it kind of gradually went down. It didn't just go away immediately. It gradually went down.
Okay.
So there was nothing. And that's when I stood up and I was pissed.
Yeah. So these sounds that you were hearing, did they just completely stop altogether?
The stomping and yeah. I didn't hear the walk. I didn't hear them go to the left, to the right, come up to the road. As far as walking through the leaves, I don't recollect any of that. When I sat down, that's when the stomping stopped. When I sat down and stared at the ground between my legs, that's when the stomping through the limbs stopped. I mean, it sounded like it was. It sounded like it was like right there. If I'd have looked up, I would have seen it, but I couldn't make myself look.
That's interesting. I've recently had conversations about that with other researchers, and it is thought that, yes, it's thought that sitting on the ground, you know, much like one would interact with a gorilla, you know, sitting on the ground and facing slightly away.
Submission.
Exactly.
Like submission?
Or at least not being quite so threatening, you know. It's like saying I'm
well,
not...
I wasn't consciously aware that I sat down until I was there. I can remember walking to the rock and sitting on it, and then looking down and staring at the ground. But that's what happened.
Does anything about the way you behaved surprise you?
That I behaved?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm not afraid of death, and there's been a lot of times I've wished it. I had a pretty rough life, you know. So having that kind of fear, I've never been that afraid in my life. it was so loud. They weren't just stomping on a limb. It was stomping on groups of limbs, piles of limbs. And it was, it was loud.
Yeah. They were definitely trying to make an impression, it sounds like.
Yeah. And then there were some comical things that would happen too. Oh, I forgot to send you a picture. I had left to go get some fuel and supplies, and I came back and there was a tree tipped over. Oh, there's 2 trees. I wonder if I can find that picture. There's one tree. When I first drove up there, it wasn't there, but it was bent. The tree was bent over to cross the road. It wasn't pulled from the ground, but it was bent. I do have a picture of the tree across the road.
Cool. Yeah, I want to see that.
Anyway, it was just an old burnt tree, maybe, and I always consider maybe the wind blew it over, but I don't recall any wind that day, but what do I know?
Right.
There were some comical things that would happen. They would mimic, as I said, I'm an outdoorsman. I know what everything sounds like in the forest. They would poorly mimic birds, whether it's a hawk or a blue jay or a woodpecker. and they mimic them badly, but it was very loud, way louder than, like I said before, a 20-foot barn owl.
Right.
There was a 20-foot woodpecker. But what was funny was you'd hear one bad mimic of a crow, and a hawk or a woodpecker would answer. I don't think they know that different species don't communicate. Maybe they were young. I don't know. And then they would do this woodpecker, knock, 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 knock. And of course it was way too loud for a woodpecker. It was so loud that the knocking would answer clear down to the bottom of the mountain.
So this wasn't actually the call of a woodpecker that they were making. This was the knocking sound.
No, well, woodpeckers, for one, they actually have a bird song. They don't communicate by knocking.
Right. Yeah. In fact, that old Woody the Woodpecker cartoon, that little sound that he makes.
Yeah.
That I actually realized when I was living in Butte County. I realized that the woodpeckers there make that same sound. So that Woody the Woodpecker call, that is the actual sound that that kind of woodpecker makes.
When you're there for 5.5 months and you're in that forest, you don't realize it, but you're in tune with everything around you.
Certainly.
The sounds and you're sitting there and you'll hear one of these bad ones just pop up. And there was a lot of times that I looked where it was close enough. I mean, I've got good hearing. And I looked, and it should have been close enough where I would have seen the bird, and I saw nothing. And then they would answer from somewhere behind me in the forest. And there's another thing that we didn't, before I forget, we didn't talk about. I think that they use crows as watchdogs, because when I would go hike, and there was another bird, and I've never been able to name which kind of bird it is. It was a real bird, but when you're hiking and going somewhere, they give you away before you can get there, always. And you can feel it. You can feel them. You can feel
what? The crows, you mean?
No, you can feel when they're around.
Right, the Sasquatch.
I told you about the third eye.
Yes.
Did I send you the picture of the third eye? I did. Okay.
You did, yeah. And I wanted to post that one on Instagram too, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Cool.
I'll tell a story about the whole third eye thing. I had taken my kids to a children's museum in Nebraska, and there's these 3 panels with thousands of little red plastic pegs, and you can push in on it. It gives a reverse impression. Because my kids are deaf, I always did see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. So I did the 3 of them with my hands over my eyes, my hands over my mouth, my hand over my mouth, and my hands over my ears in each panel. In the third panel, you can see my third eye, and when you zoom in on it, you can actually see. So when you post one picture of it zoomed in, you can see the pegs actually going into my skull. It's crazy.
Yeah, that was pretty insane looking. So you didn't go to the other side of the pegs and push it in with your hand or something, did you?
No, I swear on the lives of my children. No, I didn't even. I had that picture probably for 3 years before I noticed it.
Wow. Yeah, you can see the shadow in there and everything. You could see this crater in your head.
Yeah. When I first found it, I'm like, what the fuck is that? Yeah. Sorry about the F-bomb there.
No, that's cool. We can drop F-bombs on this show. So you can say all the F-bombs.
All right. My grandma had the third eye. My son does to a degree. To give you an example, Lincoln, Nebraska, I don't know, 480,000, 500,000, whatever it is. But their mother and I were split up. They lived on the other side of town. Because they're deaf, we texted each other. So one day I'm at home and I got a pork loin on the grill, and I decided to do a Hawaiian. So I opened it up and added the seasoning that I needed, and I was just laying pineapple down. My son sends me a text. Dear Dad, I love pineapple.
Oh.
You know, when he was like 9 months old, we had a big house, you know, and I'd call to his mom, hey, it's time to get Bath going. I'll get his toys if you'll bring him. And he's already coming with these toys and shucking clothes. You know, there's no way he could have heard me because they were deaf.
Right.
You know, and it was a good sized home. You know, there's no way he could have read lips or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when he's got it, my daughter's got it to a degree. And so I sometimes wonder if that might be part. And I attract ghosts. In fact, I have one. I brought Sage home tonight. My ghost has been knocking stuff off shelves and banging around. So I'm just going to have words with my spirit. I don't know if it's my mom just passed away last December.
Oh, my condolences.
Or it's either when I bought this motorhome, if you lift the hood, it says, my name is Myrtle. Please take care of her. She lasted me through 7 grandkids and my late wife. And then in the back compartment, it says something about the same thing. So I don't know if it's that lady that inhabits this. It's been ever since I've owned it. Sometimes I'll be sitting here on the bed and I'll feel movement underneath my butt. There's a half inch slab of plywood under that, and under that is my water tank. You know, so there should be nothing moving underneath my butt.
Yeah, I've lived in an RV myself, and I can't think of anything in an RV that would cause that to happen.
Yeah. Well, my cats will sit and stare at that same spot that makes a banging noise over in the corner. And they'll both, back when I had two, they would sit there. And that's how I know when it's back, because the cat gives it away. But before I forget, I think that they could be possibility that because of that, maybe they're in tune with me. That's why they made themselves known the first time. I don't know. That's just a theory. I personally think they're interdimensional.
Well, you've kind of implied that people with certain sensitivities may be more prone to having these kinds of experiences with Sasquatch. Would you say that's a fair thing to say?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I don't know about other people. I mean,
sure.
You know, I mean, I've read so many stories, encounters, whatever, that they don't mention that part, you know. So I only know about myself.
When you and I were speaking recently, you told me something along the lines that it seems like they must have a hive mind, like you encountered this individual.
Yeah. That was it. Well, I mean, I came across one in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. You know, I saw its tracks. I smelled it. I felt it walking less than a foot away from me. It was right beside my tent. You know, and I was sitting on the ground right beside the wall. So I mean, it was close. And then suddenly it seemed like, well, of all the places I could camp, oh, I know what it was. Before I forget, all you got to do is Google Sasquatch hanging their kills in trees, and there's a report that specifically states right there by Loon Lake.
Really?
Yeah.
So it points out that behavior in that same spot.
Yes.
Sweet.
Yep. It's easy to find. Just Google Sasquatch hanging kills in trees, whatever. I just saw it a couple weeks ago when I came across it by accident.
Oh, I'm going to check that out immediately.
It seems like once they knew I knew, or, I mean, I was sitting there smoking pot. It knew I had a little lantern on in there. It was lit up. So it knew I was there. Why would it walk less than a foot away from me? You know, and my mountain bike, it's a big fat tire bike. It's a big giant 28-inch monster. It's not light. And when it tripped over the corner of my tent, it flipped that bike on top of me.
Wow.
I just feel like it was on purpose.
Yeah, it sounds like that to me too. It didn't have to squeeze by you. There was like as you're describing
me all the way.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it had plenty of room to get wherever it wanted to go. the fact that it was right next to your tent was intentional. I want to mention something right now. When we've spoken about the hive mind that you mentioned, if I can kind of summarize it, you encountered a Sasquatch in Oklahoma, and then you encountered Sasquatches in Oregon years later.
Three of them in Oregon.
Right. And that kind of leads you to believe or feel or suspect that they might have a collective consciousness of sorts, and the fact that this one individual checked you out in Oklahoma and he vetted you, he realized you're cool, so the Sasquatches in Oregon, they had access to this collective this collective consciousness of sorts, and they were privy to this information that you're cool and that you're not going to do them any harm, so they took an interest in you and they interacted with you. Does that sound somewhat reasonable? Am I summarizing that correctly?
I don't know if there's any vetting going on, but I believe that they truly know your nature. They know. This is one of the things that I believe, that they're interdimensional, because they seem to know what you're going to do before you do it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't seem to catch them. You can't seem to take pictures. They can spot the infrared.
Yes, they
can on cameras. But MK Davis. Do you know who MK Davis is?
I do. Yeah, he's from Mississippi.
Okay. Have you seen any of his stuff?
I have.
He puts his camera facing in a mirror.
I think I know the one you're referring to.
There's the junk man where he's crawling on all fours and goes to an upright position and runs. And then there's another one where there's two of them fighting out in a field, a white one and a dark one. But apparently that's what he does. He uses mirrors. But they just seem to know your intentions and your nature, what's inside your heart.
When you have mentioned the hive mind, it reminds me of something I read years ago about a team of scientists who went to a remote Japanese island, and they introduced a behavior to the monkeys who lived on this island that had never been seen in this particular species of monkey before. They taught these monkeys how to wash the roots that they were eating, in the water. And this is completely new to these monkeys. They'd never done it before. And so these scientists went to a different very remote Japanese island with a different population of monkeys of the same species. And these two islands, these monkeys on these two islands, of course, had never had any contact with one another. But when the scientists arrived at the second island, they saw that the monkeys on this other island had also begun washing their roots in the water. So it's very interesting. They introduced the behavior to one group of these monkeys, and then a completely isolated group elsewhere had picked up on the same behavior. And we know that humans, for example, the bow and arrow technology sprang up all over the world at roughly the same time. It seems like it very much is a group consciousness that we can all tap into. And I wonder if you've kind of stumbled upon a truth there about the Sasquatch. I wonder if they are privy to a collective consciousness that they can all tap into. Maybe this is why certain individuals encounter them more, because they do know that this individual is an okay individual to interact with.
Well, my gut, call it my third eye, my intuition, it's never wrong. The third eye thing, it's never been wrong. I caught a wife cheating on me just by looking to the left, and I found out, and I just knew. It just popped in my brain, and I knew. And I followed my nose, and sure enough. It's never been wrong, and my gut tells me that this is true. And and here's another thing. Maybe they can't do that. I painted that Sasquatch head on that rock, and I left it sit there for a couple months. Maybe that's what did it. Who knows?
Right.
I keep an open mind.
So that rock had been there for a couple of months before they.
No, a couple of weeks.
Couple weeks. Okay. And then after that, everything kind of amped up a bit.
Yeah. I mean, there was nothing. Oh, whoa. My first week there, I'm sitting there, I think painting or doing whatever I was doing, and a really nasty smell came down the mountain, or from behind me. It was higher than I was sitting, And I turned around and I stood up and looked, and of course I didn't see anything, and the wind was carrying it. I don't know from how far, but it was a pretty foul smell. It wasn't a smell. It wasn't a smell that's natural to a forest. But and who knows what that was? Maybe I don't know. It didn't smell like a gut pile or carrion. It was just like a really nasty, unwashed person.
Gross. There are a couple of things I want to get into about what you've said. Now, you mentioned the thing about the very obvious poor bird mimicry.
Yeah.
Well, off mic, I had told you about.
It just makes me laugh, because logical mind says the older ones. I mean, who knows how long they live? The older ones probably know how to mimic dead on. These were done very, very badly. I mean, so I would hear it and I would laugh. And occurrences became so often, like the wood knocks from. I'm sitting in my motorhome and reading a book, and I hear wood knocks. I'm estimating 50, 60 feet away into the forest. It just got so. Oh, I remember when I forgot the knocking on my windows.
Ooh.
But by that time I was so used to everything that I didn't even bother to get up and go look. I knew what it was. So one night, I got the generator going. I had the generator probably 100, 150 feet away, and so I could watch movies and whatnot. And it's midnight, no moon, and again I was the only one on that mountain. If I'd have known if there was anybody else on that mountain, I would have left and gone someplace else, because I want to be able to leave and not think somebody's going to come rob me. And there's nobody on that mountain, and the windows are open. It's hot summer, and I'm watching a movie, and I'm facing the TV, and the back of the TV is facing the window, which is open. And there were two knocks. Keep in mind my window is 6 feet off the ground. It wasn't, and it sounded like a knuckle rapping on the window. Knock. Knock. That was it. I didn't even bother to get up. I knew what it was.
Yeah.
I say hi.
Right.
I mean, it's dark out there. My windows are tinted. There was no moon. There was nothing I was going to see had I have gotten up. Had I have gone to the door, they would have been gone. I think that they can pixelate. You know what I'm talking about? How they camouflage themselves, like Predator does on Predator.
Yeah, and they can cloak. You mean
cloak? That's it.
Right.
There's a lot of people that report that. Now, I don't know about that, but I know that when I heard bird call coming from close enough for me to see, should be able to see it, and I don't see anything. That makes me wonder.
Well,
and a lot of times I would feel like that they were up in the trees, because my motorhome was parked on a fire road and it went right down a canyon cliff. Right, so there were trees growing up it, and I always felt like I was being watched. Always trust your gut. Always trust your intuition. If you feel like you're being watched, because you are. It's just like if you feel like somebody's talking about you and you turn your back, it's because they are. And I always felt that they were in the trees looking in my windows. I think we're like cheap entertainment for them. They're.
Oh, absolutely.
They seem to run in fear, but yet they'll creep up on. There's lots of reports that they'll creep right feet away from people. Well, in the tent, it happened to me. When we were laying down sleeping, they'll creep up on you, but God forbid you see them. And I think that they're curious creatures by nature.
Oh yeah,
they're living vicariously through our windows.
Sure.
And I had a movie going. I got a good sized screen TV. For all I know, they're looking in my windows, watching TV with me. I don't care. I know they're there. It's like, for your listeners, check out How to Hunt. And Scott Carpenter, he's a pretty straight up guy. Steve Isdall from How to Hunt, and the missing 411 guy, Dave Politis.
Yeah, David Politis.
Those two guys are pretty tight.
Yeah, I know they know each other. So you're talking about looking up How to Hunt on YouTube, correct?
Yes.
All right.
Same with Missing 411. Same with Scott Carpenter. And here's the thing: what Steve Isdall does, he doesn't give a shit about footprints, videos, pictures, audio. He lives in British Columbia. He's seen them. His grandpa saw them. They're very common, just like they're here in Southern Oregon. People, I know they're there. But what happens from that very first time in Oklahoma, it changes your life.
Yes, it does.
I mean, you try because it's just something so out of this world, and you're trying to wrap your brain around it, and you're trying to tell the people closest to you, your friends and family, and nobody believes you. So that makes you more determined, and it just engrosses you. And some people have thrown their marriages and lives away, and their financial empires away in the search for these things, because it just grabs a hold of you, and part of the learning process, you got to always find the positive out of every negative and make use of it, so that shit can the negative and move forward. And living on that mountain, I mean, it got so commonplace that when I heard the bad mimicking of the birds, I would just laugh. I wouldn't bother to look anymore. When I heard the wood knocking, I didn't bother to look. The knock on the window at night when I was watching TV, okay, well, I know they're there. I don't have to prove it to myself. It got to where I would follow my tracks on the trail in case I saw a print.
Right.
And I will say, my first day there, it had rained, and I had got to the top of the mountain, and it looked like a partial child's barefoot print in the mud.
Did you say of a child?
Yeah, it was like a child's barefoot print, but it was only half of a print from the arch to the back of the heel.
Right, okay.
And as I was bending down to look at it, that's one of the times old Hot Rod decided he wanted to go back home, because he'd never been on a mountain before, so he wasn't too sure about it yet. So I couldn't wait. He wanted to go, and so I had to go too.
Right.
When we went for hikes, he would decide who was going to lead.
Right.
If he wanted to lead, he'd keep running in front of me, and I'd have to follow him. But there's some days that he didn't want to lead, so I would have to go. He's a pretty cool little hiking buddy.
It sounds like it. You've spoken about the absurd bird calls, and I want to share something with you just from earlier today. Now, off mic, you and I spoke about a very promising and known active Sasquatch hotspot in my area that I'm exploring and keeping a close eye on. I went up there today. I couldn't get all the way to the top because even at this time in May, there was still some snow blocking the road at the very top of where I was going. And so I stopped the car. I got out with my camera. I have a Nikon P1000 that has an equivalent 3,000 millimeter zoom. I got it for investigating Sasquatch. And so I got out of the car. I was looking around in this breathtakingly beautiful area, and I wanted to make it known on a non-physical level, non-verbal level, that I was a friend to the Sasquatch. So I just kind of internally opened myself up and said to the Sasquatch non-verbally that I was a friend and they could interact with me. The moment that I did this, I heard a very high-pitched kind of call. It sounded very bird-like, but it was very loud, and it was coming from nearby. And then it did another one. And then after it did that, one answered it from not far away. And then they kept doing this back and forth, but the sounds kept moving around. It was weird. Like the calls or the answers, the replies kept moving around the mountain. And
could be they wanted to see how you would react.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there is the possibility that these actually were birds, but it was so strange. It stood out to me. It just didn't seem right. Like you said before about the dead silence, it was dead silent up there. There was no sound whatsoever. And then after I kind of opened myself to interacting with the Sasquatch, I hear this call and then this reply, and then it just keeps moving around the mountain like that. It seemed very intentional.
There's a lot of documented encounters in that area, Dunsmuir, Weed.
Oh, yeah.
Up on Shasta. I think they live in the lava vents in the caves.
They almost certainly do. Now, I lost everything in the campfire in Paradise. And after...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And after I lost everything, I decided to move to Siskiyou County in very large part because of the phenomena that happen here, including the enormous concentration of Sasquatch activity in this area. Sasquatch is very important to me. I moved here to research Sasquatch.
Oh, my friend that's the author that belongs to that group I told you about.
Right.
And she asked what your last name was, the name of your podcast.
Yeah.
She sent back a thumbs up. So I asked her, I said, is it okay to give him your number? And she's not on her phone a lot, so she hasn't answered back yet, but I suspect you're going to be having an interview with her.
I would love that.
She has a very, very interacting with them. A lot of the woo, like I said, she wrote a book.
Yeah.
They've been making themselves known to her since she was a young woman.
Awesome.
She's my age now, in her 50s. So I'm not making any promises, but it's looking like you're going to be able to talk to her.
Great.
I'm hoping.
Yeah, and when you talk to her, let her know that I am not afraid of the woo on this show.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to speaking with her.
That's all I got. I swear in my life, every word is true.
Yeah, I can totally sense your sincerity on this. That's kind of perfect timing because we're at the end of the show anyway. I just want to go over one thing really quickly. You and I are going to go visit this spot that you're talking about. We're going to spend some time there. Yeah. And
there's two spots.
Right.
The one that my friend that I was just talking about, the one that she's sending me to, that she interacted with him.
Yeah.
And she's taking me right to the spot.
Excellent.
We've already discussed where that is.
Yes.
And so there's two places. One place, the place where I'm family, and this other place that she's been to. So yeah.
So we're going to divide our time between these two places. And for a long time, I have had this idea about a habituation technique. I want to run it by you really quickly. Your experience makes me think that this idea of mine just might work. So let's hear what you think of this. I have this idea of approaching the tree line where I think I might have a reasonable expectation of some Sasquatch activity. I approach the tree line. I wave.
Oh, I could point it out.
Yeah, great. So I wave into the tree line. I'm just waving, nice friendly gesture, and I point to myself repeatedly, saying my name, Sam. And after I do this, I leave an actual photograph of myself at the site drinking a beer. And then I leave that same brand of beer with the same label with the cap off in front of the picture. And so I'm basically giving a Sasquatch instruction on how to drink this beer. And, people might think that's kind of silly, but...
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of animals are actually known to ferment fruit for the purpose of creating alcohol. A lot of animals enjoy alcohol. Really? Yeah, elephants ferment fruit in their trunks for the purpose of creating alcohol. Chimpanzees, I believe, are known to do this. Yeah, primates definitely do this. So I have every reason to believe that a Sasquatch might enjoy an alcoholic beverage just to relax. And I think that this is a good way of opening up a conversation with Sasquatch. Whether or not this technique actually leads to the results that I want, it kind of almost doesn't matter because it is a way of establishing a rapport. It is at least a way of taking a first step with them.
Well, one time I left a bottle or a can of ravioli. It's got the ring that you can just pop off.
Right.
Nothing ever took it, so I didn't want to leave garbage, so I took it back home. But before I left a half of a bottle, or half of a 2-liter bottle of Red Mountain Dew in a particular spot. So when we go back to that place, I'm kind of curious to see if it's still going to be there or if it's gone.
Ah, yeah. I'm curious to see that too. Holy shit, we got to get out there. That also reminds me of a guy's story who said like a Sasquatch took a mug from him at a certain spot, and then he returned to the spot like a year or two later, and that mug was out in the middle of the road. Like the Sasquatch had left it in the middle of the road when he got there.
Yeah, the whole interdimensional. They can see ahead. You know, who knows? Maybe they knew he was coming.
That is possible, but it's also possible that I'm
I
kind
mean,
of.
how you explain footsteps in the snow and they just stop and disappear.
That is also true. But as for this guy's particular story, it might be the case that I've just forgotten a detail, like maybe he had been there like for a couple days before they did this. I don't know. Like I'm not completely remembering the whole story, so don't quote me on that. But I know that the mug thing happened, so that's really cool. So, all right, Kip, you and I have come to the end of the show. We're going to go up to this place. We're going to check it out, and I think
whenever you're ready. I can't find anybody that's got the balls to go with me.
Well, I've got the balls, my friend. I have the balls to go with you.
I've been wanting to share this place with my sister, with my ex-girlfriend. I can't get anybody to go up there with me.
Well, you found
the
guy
that will go up with everything. He's in Missouri. He's not here anymore. So
right.
You're it. You're my huckleberry, buddy.
Sweet. I'll be your huckleberry. So after you and I check this out, what do you say we have another conversation and tell everybody what came of it? How's that sound?
Oh, absolutely.
Sweet.
What kind of equipment do you have? You know about EVPs and stuff? I got a great story about a haunted house I lived in where we got EVPs. I'm kind of curious about leaving microphones out. You know, there's no infrared light for them. You know, who knows what you're gonna pick up?
Right. I don't have any of that kind of equipment. I have a friend who has some of that. My equipment is kind of straightforward recording equipment, audio, video, photography, that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm just curious, you know, that whole thing that M.K. Davis does with the mirror, if a guy couldn't do something like that, you know, and just leave it up.
That's a really a good idea because that's indirect, and maybe even if you're using infrared, maybe it would kind of diffuse it to the point where they don't notice it or something like that.
There's on How to Hunt. There's this guy. He's a nuclear physicist, and he just like yesterday's story or 2 days ago maybe. This guy and other nuclear physicists have seen Sasquatch inside the perimeter. Nobody knows how they got in or got out, looking right up at the cameras and a lot of strange stuff. You and I could talk for hours.
Yeah, we could, and you know, we'll break those hours up into individual shows, and we'll give people, you know, some insight into what we've found. Kip, sure. It's been a great conversation. Great hearing from you.
Yeah, I had fun.
I love talking about all things Sasquatch. Your encounter is incredible. You and I are going to go check this place out. I can't wait, and I can't wait to share what we find with our listeners. Yeah. I mean, I can't wait to lay eyes on this place myself.
So looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And to see the pictures of some of the things that Kip's talking about, look for Type 471 Podcast on Instagram. Kip, thank you so much for being on Type 471. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You bet, Sam. Take care.
All right, take care. Thanks. Follow Type 471 Podcast on Instagram and Twitter. Look for Type 471 Podcast on Spotify, Google, Pandora, iHeartRadio, and many other platforms. I'm Sam Kitchen. Thanks for listening to Type 471.